They found some dowdy nobody at the dump, the coworkers laughed. But at the company party, she walked into the room wearing a designer dress, and everyone fell silent. The memory hit Claire like a slap every morning when she walked through those glass doors. 3 months ago, Madison's voice had carried across the entire break room, dripping with venom as she described Claire's outfit to the other marketing assistants. The word still burned. Dowdy nobody from the dump. Claire had pretended to focus on her sandwich, but her hands had trembled so badly she couldn't take another bite. That night, she'd stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her tiny Seattle apartment, seeing exactly what they saw: faded clothes from discount stores, hair that never quite cooperated, makeup skills that belonged in high school. The woman staring back looked defeated before the day even began, but something had shifted in that moment of recognition. The insurance settlement letter had arrived on a Tuesday, completely ordinary except for the way it changed everything. Her grandmother's modest house in Spokane, destroyed in a fire 6 months earlier, had been worth far more than anyone imagined. The check felt impossible in her hands. $57,000 after taxes. Claire had called in sick that day, sitting on her couch with the letter spread across her coffee table like a map to a different life. For the first time since starting at Peterson 9 Associates, she allowed herself to imagine walking into that office as someone else entirely. Not Claire the invisible, Claire the joke, Claire who ate lunch alone while others whispered, someone who belonged. The transformation began with research. Claire spent her evenings studying fashion blogs, makeup tutorials, and styling guides, with the intensity she usually reserved for client presentations. She learned about color theory, about how certain cuts could reshape a silhouette, about the subtle signals that expensive clothing sent before you even spoke. The knowledge felt like armor she was slowly assembling, piece by piece. She practiced makeup techniques until her bathroom counter looked like a cosmetics store exploded, practiced walking in heels until her feet stopped betraying her uncertainty. Every small improvement felt like claiming territory in a war she'd been losing for years. The annual company party was still 6 weeks away, but Claire had found her battlefield. The shopping expedition required strategy. Claire drove to Portland, 2 hours away, where no one from Peterson Associates would accidentally spot her. The department stores felt like foreign countries with their own languages and customs, but she'd done her homework. The personal shopper, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah, didn't ask questions when Claire explained she needed a complete wardrobe overhaul. The black dress they selected cost more than Claire's monthly rent, but when she saw herself in it, she understood why. The fabric moved like water, the cut transforming her modest curves into something that demanded attention. Standing in that dressing room, Claire barely recognized the reflection staring back. This woman looked like she belonged anywhere she chose to be. The weeks leading up to the party became a careful performance. Claire continued wearing her old clothes to work, maintained her usual quiet demeanor, ate lunch alone with her book. But everything felt different now, like she was playing a role while her real self waited in the wings. Madison continued her casual cruelties, making comments about Claire's appearance that used to cut deep but now felt irrelevant. Jake from accounting, one of the few people who'd ever been genuinely kind to her, noticed something different in her demeanor but couldn't place what had changed. Claire just smiled when he mentioned it, the secret burning bright and warm in her chest. Soon, she thought, very soon, everything would change. The day of the party, Claire left work at her usual time, giving no indication that this evening would be anything special. At home, she followed the routine she'd practiced dozens of times. The expensive skincare products she'd bought transformed her complexion into something luminous. The professional-grade makeup brushes felt familiar in her hands now, each stroke deliberate and precise. The transformation took 2 hours, but when she finally stepped into the black dress and looked in her full-length mirror, she gasped. The woman looking back wasn't Claire from Peterson Associates. This was someone entirely new, someone powerful, someone who commanded respect without saying a word. Her hands were steady as she fastened the diamond earrings she'd bought to complete the look. The Grand Marriott's ballroom buzzed with familiar voices when Claire arrived, 30 minutes after the party had officially begun. She'd timed it perfectly. late enough for everyone to be settled and comfortable, early enough to make an impact. Standing outside the ballroom doors, she could hear Madison's distinctive laugh cutting through the chatter, probably sharing another cruel observation about someone's appearance. Claire's reflection in the glass doors showed a stranger, elegant, composed, breathtaking. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her expression remained serene. This was the moment everything changed. She pushed open the doors and stepped into her new life. The conversation near the entrance died first. Tom from sales stopped mid-sentence, his mouth actually falling open as he stared. The silence spread like ripples in a pond, each person turning to see what had captured everyone's attention. Claire moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her heels clicking confidently against the marble floor. She could feel the weight of every gaze, hear the whispered questions starting to buzz around her. Is that? It can't be. No way, that's Claire from marketing. The doubt in their voices was music to her ears. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, her movements fluid and natural, as if she'd been attending events like this her entire life. Madison stood frozen near the bar, her own designer dress suddenly looking ordinary in comparison. Her carefully crafted superiority crumbled as Claire approached, and for the first time in their 2 years of working together, Madison seemed speechless. Claire smiled, the expression warm but carrying an edge of triumph that only Madison would recognize. The other marketing assistants clustered around Madison like confused sheep, their usual confident chatter reduced to stunned whispers. Claire didn't need to say anything about dowdy nobodies or dumps. Her presence spoke louder than any words could. She was no longer the woman they dismissed and mocked. She was someone they didn't recognize, someone who clearly belonged in spaces they'd assumed were beyond her reach. Jake materialized at her elbow, his eyes wide with amazement, and something that looked like pride. He'd always treated her with basic human decency when others hadn't, and seeing his genuine happiness at her transformation warmed something inside her chest. He complimented her appearance with the same straightforward kindness he'd always shown, no hidden agenda or calculated interest. For a moment, Claire felt a pang of something like guilt. Jake had liked her before this transformation, had seen value in the woman everyone else dismissed. But the feeling passed quickly as she noticed Madison still staring from across the room, her expression cycling through confusion, anger, and what looked suspiciously like fear. The evening unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged Claire's existence suddenly found reasons to approach her. Senior partners whose names she knew but who had never known hers introduced themselves with obvious interest. The transformation wasn't just about the dress or the makeup. It was about the confidence radiating from every gesture, every smile, every carefully modulated response to their surprised compliments. Claire found herself at the center of conversations instead of hovering at their edges, her opinions suddenly worth hearing, her laugh suddenly worth earning. The invisible woman from the marketing department had vanished completely, replaced by someone who commanded the room's attention without effort. But the real victory came when Mr. Peterson himself approached her near the dessert table. The company's founder, a man who'd never spoken directly to her in 2 years of employment, extended his hand with a smile that reached his eyes. He complimented not just her appearance but her recent work on the Morrison account, work that had gone unnoticed by everyone else but apparently hadn't escaped his attention. They talked for 15 minutes about marketing strategies and client relations, a conversation that would have been impossible when she was invisible, Claire. As they spoke, she noticed Madison hovering nearby, clearly trying to overhear, her face a mask of barely controlled rage and disbelief. The conversation with Peterson shifted something fundamental in the room's dynamics. Other senior staff members, who had been watching the interaction with interest, began gravitating toward Claire with new respect. She wasn't just the transformed marketing assistant anymore. She was someone the boss had taken time to know personally. The social mathematics of office politics recalculated around her new status in real time. Madison's usual circle of admirers began fragmenting as they hedged their bets, suddenly remembering times they'd been kind to Claire, suddenly finding reasons to compliment her work. The power structure that had seemed so permanent that morning was reshaping itself around Claire's presence, and everyone in the room could feel the shift. As the evening progressed, Claire found herself genuinely enjoying conversations she would have been excluded from just hours earlier. The confidence wasn't just costume anymore. It was becoming real, fed by each successful interaction, each sign of respect she'd never received before. She shared insights about upcoming campaigns, offered suggestions that were actually listened to, even made people laugh with observations that would have been ignored when they came from invisible Claire. The woman she was becoming felt more authentic than the woman she'd been, as if the transformation had revealed her true self rather than creating a false one. But she never forgot who had made that revelation necessary. Madison finally approached as the evening wound down, her smile brittle and her voice carrying a forced casualness that fooled no one. She attempted to compliment Claire's appearance, the words sounding like they were being extracted with pliers. Claire accepted the compliment graciously, her own smile never wavering, but her eyes held memories of every cruel comment, every dismissive laugh, every moment she'd been made to feel less than human. She didn't need to mention the dowdy nobody comment. They both knew it hung in the air between them. Madison's discomfort was palpable as she realized the balance of power had shifted permanently, that the woman she'd tormented was now someone she needed to placate. The party began winding down, but Claire's evening was far from over. 3 different senior colleagues had handed her business cards, suggesting lunch meetings to discuss her career trajectory. The head of the Portland branch had mentioned an opening in their strategic planning department, a position that would mean a substantial promotion and escape from Madison's daily torments. Even the CEO's assistant had approached her, mentioning that Mr. Peterson had asked for Claire's direct contact information for future project discussions. Each conversation felt like another door opening, opportunities that had been invisible when she was invisible. The investment in her transformation was already paying dividends beyond her wildest expectations. As Claire prepared to leave, she caught her reflection in the ballroom's mirrored walls. The woman looking back still took her by surprise, elegant, confident, undeniably powerful. But more than the external transformation, she could see something different in her own eyes. The defeat was gone, replaced by a quiet strength that no amount of expensive clothing could create. She'd proven something to herself tonight that went beyond showing up her tormentors. She discovered that the person everyone had dismissed had always possessed the capability to command respect. She just needed the right circumstances to reveal it. The dowdy nobody from the dump had never really existed. She'd been Claire all along. The ride home felt surreal, like traveling between 2 different worlds. Claire's apartment looked exactly the same, but she felt like a different person walking through the door. The black dress hung carefully in her closet next to her old work clothes, a stark visual reminder of the evening's transformation. She removed her makeup slowly, watching in the mirror, as the dramatic evening look gave way to her natural features. But something fundamental had changed that couldn't be washed away. The confidence wasn't painted on, it had become part of her. Tomorrow, she would return to Peterson and Associates, but not as the same woman who had left that afternoon. Monday morning brought a different kind of anticipation. Claire chose her outfit carefully, not the designer pieces from her shopping expedition, but clothes that bridged the gap between her old self and her new confidence. She walked through those glass doors with her head high, and immediately noticed the difference in how people looked at her. The party had reset everyone's perceptions, and even in her regular work attire, she carried herself like someone who deserved to be there. Madison's greeting was stiff and uncertain, lacking her usual condescending edge. The casual cruelties that had been Claire's daily reality seemed to have evaporated overnight, replaced by a grudging respect that felt like victory. The morning brought an email that would have been impossible a week earlier. Mr. Peterson wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss Claire's career development and potential advancement opportunities. As she read the message, Claire remembered every lunch eaten alone, every meeting where her ideas had been ignored, every casual dismissal she'd endured. The transformation hadn't just changed how others saw her, it had changed how she saw herself. She was no longer willing to accept invisibility as her natural state. The dowdy nobody comment that had once devastated her now seemed like the catalyst for the best decision she'd ever made. Sometimes the cruelest words became the greatest gifts. The meeting with Peterson exceeded every expectation Claire had dared to harbor. He offered her the position in strategic planning she'd heard mentioned at the party, along with a salary increase that would change her life completely. More importantly, he spoke to her as an equal, someone whose opinions mattered and whose potential was worth investing in. As they discussed her new responsibilities, Claire caught sight of Madison through the glass conference room walls, watching the meeting with obvious anxiety. The woman who had once held social power over the entire marketing department now looked small and uncertain, clearly recognizing that the dynamics had shifted beyond her control. 2 weeks later, Claire cleared out her desk in the marketing department. Her colleagues' reactions ranged from genuine congratulations to barely concealed resentment, but none of it touched her the way their previous dismissals had. She was moving to the 32nd floor, to an office with windows and a door that closed, to a position where her intelligence would be valued instead of overlooked. Jake helped her pack, his pride in her success evident and uncomplicated. He was one of the few people who seemed to understand that the party hadn't created a new person. It had simply revealed the person who had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Madison made one final attempt at reconciliation as Claire packed her personal items, offering a lunch invitation that sounded more like a peace treaty negotiation than a friendly gesture. Claire accepted graciously, knowing that their relationship had fundamentally changed and could never return to its previous dynamic. The woman who had once reduced her to tears with casual cruelty now needed her goodwill, now recognized her as someone whose opinion mattered. The reversal felt like justice, but more than that, it felt like proof that the person everyone had underestimated had possessed the strength to rise above their limited expectations all along. 6 months later, Claire barely recognized her old life. Her new office overlooked Elliott Bay, her salary had doubled, and her opinions shaped company strategy. She'd kept the black dress from that transformative evening, but she rarely needed such dramatic statements anymore. The confidence that had seemed like a costume that night had become simply who she was. She still saw Madison occasionally in meetings, their interactions professional but carrying the weight of their shared history. Sometimes Claire wondered if she should feel grateful for those cruel comments that had sparked her transformation, but mostly she felt proud of her own strength in turning pain into power. The annual company party approached again, and Claire found herself looking forward to it with anticipation rather than dread. This time, she wouldn't need to arrive late for dramatic effect, or spend weeks planning her appearance. She belonged in that ballroom now, had earned her place through talent and determination rather than designer clothing. As she prepared for the evening, she thought about the woman who had once eaten lunch alone, who had trembled at cruel comments, who had believed she was exactly as small as others made her feel. That woman had possessed everything necessary for success. She just needed to believe in herself enough to let it show. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen not when you became someone new, but when you finally became who you'd always been meant to be.